Hello, everyone, and welcome to They Don't Teach This in Law School. I'm your host, Charlie Mann of law firm Alchemy, and I have just a fantastic guest today, someone who I think is going to be of even extra interest to all the law firm owners out there, because we get a chance to dig into perhaps some exit planning, some financial evaluation of your firm, some of the in-depth business aspects that often go ignored, even though some of these topics that we will almost certainly cover are great frameworks to figure out big next steps for your practice. And if that all sounds like a little esoteric at the moment, I promise we're going to layer on the necessary details. We're going to put meat on those bones during this discussion. I have with me Ed Alexander of Alexander Business Law. Ed, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Charlie. Pleasure to be here.
Awesome. So, Ed, let's just go ahead and kick it right off with the question. What's one thing they don't teach you in law school?
So one thing they don't teach you in law school is that to be your best for your clients, you must absolutely positively take care of yourself. And that means proper rest, proper nutrition, exercise, all of the things. There's just simply no way you can be consistently the best for your clients without doing all those things. And I laugh when I hear that people are working 60 hours or more a week regularly. It is not possible to produce good stuff for 60 hours a week regularly. So, I kind of liken it to athletes a little bit. If an athlete overtrains, they're going to suffer injuries. And, it's the same thing for lawyers. Frankly, it's the same thing for anybody that's either using their mind or really using their body and at a high level.
Oh, all right. Yeah. So I love where this is going, because it's a discussion that I haven't really had in depth on the show before, which is that whole taking care of yourself. And I often find that when someone brings something like that into the show, it always comes with a certain amount of backstory that may lead up to, say, recent revelation or recent change in life. So I'm curious, Ed, you bring that in here. What is informing that concept for you?
I talk to a lot of lawyers who are looking to do exit plans. And for me, by the way, just as an aside personally, I've always taken the approach that it's very important to be my best. And that requires, for me anyway, time off and really downtime, what Dan Kennedy would call free days. I firmly believe in free days. But I talk to a lot of lawyers, and when I talk to them, they are talking about, how much they're practicing. Some of them wear it with a badge of honor and are disappointed when we kind of look at the financial aspects of their firm. And I say, well, you realize you're working two jobs here, right? Because some of them really are working two jobs, and that no buyer is going to pay for working 80 or 60 hours a week. They don't want to sit in your position and then work themselves to death. They're not willing to do that. And so there has to be adjustments made to the firm for that. But again, it's this kind of view of, I see some lawyers who have wonderful lives, and I see some lawyers who really have terrible lives of their own making. And it's kind of, like I said, they wear it as a badge of honor. But at the end of the day, it's really doing them a disservice and doing the client a disservice simultaneously.
Okay, so I really want to dig into something that you started talking about there, which we are going to hit heavily, that evaluation, that how are you setting up a firm to be an investor and an investable asset, but also how can you perceive yourself as an investor in your own firm, and what outside investors might look at both now and in the future when we may have non-lawyer owner, when we will eventually have non-lawyer ownership. But I would love to break down, like for you, Ed, in terms of taking care of yourself, because everyone loves to have a model to start working with. What do you do for yourself on the sleep, diet, fitness front in order to keep yourself tuned up for clients?
Sleep is 8 hours of sleep a night. I mean, it's, some nights I'll sleep a little more, a little less, but it's 8 hours consistently a night. The diet, my wife and I have a dietitian that we work with and are very focused on eating the right things. This, by the way, we're recording this at the time of the holidays, is a very difficult time to actually stay within those guidelines, right? But we do. And then in terms of exercise, I just love biking. Absolutely love biking. I just completed a cross tour of Florida. So we went from coast to coast, and then I did a tour in the summer in upstate New York, the C&O Canal tour. It was just wonderful stuff. And I try to bike as many days a week as I can to work. So it's usually 2 or 3 days a week.
That's all. So you've incorporated that just into your lifestyle overall. And I hear you say that you have a dietitian. How long have you been working with a dietitian?
About 1.5 years, 2 years. So it's interesting. A medical event came up, and my wife started working with her, and then I started working with her as well.
It's amazing how sometimes it takes, something significant to make that type of shift. But obviously, anytime that you need something significant done, it helps to have, say, a coach or a professional in your corner who's pushing you along. So tell me a little bit the shift that you made, because the reason I'm digging in on this one is there are so many law firm owners that I work with, Ed, who this is a sticking point for them. They do the classic ebb and flow. It's all, the weight goes up, the weight goes down. Mm-hmm. It's hard to build habits. What have been some of the most significant changes, adaptations, or habits that have been developed in working with a dietitian?
So I'll just give you a little bit of background. For me, what ended up happening is I went for an annual physical. It's funny because I hadn't been for an annual physical for 5 years, and my wife forced me to go for my annual physical. And the blood work came back, and he said, "Oh, you're pre-diabetic." And I said, "Oh, whoa, wait a second. That does not fit with the way I see myself. So that is not going to happen." And
key phrase.
And so I went to the dietitian and I said, "Look, I got to make a change. This is what I want to have happen." And, laid it out for her. And so basically she put me on a low carb diet, which I've primarily been on now for 2 years. And it was wonderful because we would have monthly calls. We'd go over the diet that I had, what did I eat? What were the things that triggered and all of that. And then just little changes here and there. Now, I will tell you in the beginning, it felt like a huge change. But now it's, consistent little things, tweaking this, tweaking that, and doing it that way. So, and it's been wonderful. I lost 25 pounds in about, 4 months by correcting the diet. Yeah. Whoa. It's just amazing.
That's astonishing. Okay. So I love that whole taking that image of yourself, that right there. I want to highlight that, Ed, that this wasn't the person, this wasn't the way I saw myself. And so you actually went and did something about it. So it's really interesting because a lot of law firm owners, and yes, I'm going to use this as a really wonderful transition. I truly believe in this, which is a lot of law firm owners see themselves as, say, entrepreneur, CEO, kind of a lofty business owner title that they've given themselves. But I can imagine that in the type of work that you do, which I'd love for you to describe in depth for the listeners, because you're the expert on it, not me, where you uncover I know this is what you think your law firm is doing. This is what your law firm is actually doing. So can you start from what you do in working with law firm owners and business owners, and then kind of go into that? Here's what we find when we start turning rocks over.
Sure. So what we end up doing, we really focus on a couple of key areas. So it's exit planning, partnerships, purchases, and sales. And all of those surround really this core value or this core issue of finances and making sure that the firm, as you said, is an investable asset. And that's a distinction. So that's something we're looking for in the beginning of the relationship is how does that lawyer see their firm? Is it an investable asset or is it a job? Because if it's a job, there's not much that we can do for them. If it's an investable asset, now we can take a look and we can dive down into the details of, okay, what is this thing worth? And then for many of them, the issue is, hey, that wasn't where I need it to be for my retirement or for the future. How do we get it there? And that, of course, requires time and things of that nature. And a person like you to actually coach them through that process. So, and then, you know, we're identifying who are the prospective candidates to take over the firm. Are they internal? Are they external? You know, various factors like that. And overall, I call it really taking the firm and looking at it as a business, not as a law firm. Sure, there's a lot of issues that have to be dealt with on the law firm side. And that's where the specialization comes in to focus on the law firm piece. But at the end of the day, it's a business like any other. And it's a business that returns, when run properly, returns really good money on each dollar of fee revenue received. So that's a good thing.
Yes. I mean, so that is the joy of a professional service, a professional practice where you can have high return on investment. Now, couched in there, as you mentioned, there's the difference between having the investable asset and being an investor in your practice versus having a job that you've created yourself. Is there a line or data points that you look for that draw that distinction? Or is it something different that allows you to observe it and go, you've got a good job that we can transition you out of versus this is what an investable firm looks like?
So an investor, well, let me start off with what a job looks like, because I think that's probably a little bit easier to determine, right? So I think there's a phase that every law firm goes through, and it starts out as a job, right? Because it's the entrepreneurial seizure, right? I go out, I do it myself. But at some point, there's an awakening. And that awakening is, well, wait a second, I need to hire people to do this work. I don't need to be the person to do the work. And that first stage is, let's offload some of the things that aren't legal work, right? And let's get people to do those properly. And now I can look at them and I can say, okay, there's a return on investment here. Now, you had a guest recently on your podcast, and he had the greatest response to this was, you know, he was a non-lawyer, but he ran his spouse's practice. And he was talking about, well, if it's just a matter of throwing off, you know, 1/3 of revenue to profit, and I go out and hire a lawyer, I'm going to hire as many lawyers as I can. It's a marketing equation at that point, right? And that's essentially what we're looking for. Is the lawyer often fills the role of one of the worker bees in there, but are they also managing? Do they also have team members? And do they also have a marketing system that is generating consistent deal flow?
Okay, so when you have some of those pieces in place, that's where we start talking about having an investable asset in the practice. So when someone comes to you and they've got, say, let's just like model up a firm here. Let's call it $1 million firm. They're pulling, let's say $250,000 out of the firm, and they're only taking out profit at the end of the year, right? That $250,000 is really a profit draw. That $250,000, 25% of the firm. They've got, say, 40% of the firm going into overhead for people. They've got the rent expenses, et cetera. When you have and I understand it's a very rough sketch that I've drawn for you right there, but when you hear that, where does your mind go to? Literally any direction. Where does your mind travel to?
So what I'm thinking to myself is, there's two ways to value this firm, right? So a concept called owner benefit. So that would take the $250 in profit plus the W-2 comp that the owner was paying. And we look at that and we kind of do a quick multiplier in our heads about, okay, what's the value there? Then we go to, okay, how is that $1 million being generated? What's the percentage that's being generated by each of the people within the firm, so that I don't see an owner generating 750 of the million, right? Because that's, again, a job, not a business, and they're working themselves to death, right? And I'm looking, okay, so is that consistent over an extended period of time, like 3 years? Because if we just got in a great referral for a PI case and it's that caused us to go from 500 to a million in 1 year. Well, that doesn't count, right? Because that's extraordinary. Now, if you have that referral every single year, that would count, because we can start to see how that would be consistent revenue. But it's that one-time spike. We're going to smooth that spike over. So I want to see, what does that revenue look like? How is it being generated? And then I look at, what's the cost structure? And when we sit down with somebody, we actually create an entire model of the firm and put it up on the screen. We'll do a video call, or we'll do a face-to-face, and we put it up on the screen so we can walk through and say, hey, this looks like it's in line. This is out of line. Here are the pros and cons. This is how you match up to other firms. We use data and we compare it with other firms that have transacted in the past.
Okay. And at that point, what might be a point of advice that you're giving to that person who, let's look at that example that you said of, they're generating, say, $750,000 of that revenue. So they built that job for them. From a practical standpoint, and because I'm sure that you've worked with people who then need to start making some of that transition, what are you asking them to do over, I don't know, is it a 3-year arc, 5-year arc, in order to get this practice set up for a real exit, if that's their interest, or at least be ready for exit down the line?
Well, in that case, the first thing we'd want to do is make sure that they had another producer who was going to come in and reduce their hours, because I can tell, $750K, their hours are insane, and they're not working on the business. They're working in the business solely. So the first thing we want to do is get an attorney in there, and an attorney, maybe two, depending on where they want to go and what they think they can generate in revenue for growth. So we fix the problem and we look forward to growth. I use a law firm model that some of the factors you kind of just talked about to say, okay, where do we really need to be? Some firms you'll see, they'll have one person producing at a high level, and then they'll have another person producing at a low level. So we need to adjust that and, get that person up to the rule of thirds, which I'm sure you're aware of, a third, a third, a third.
Absolutely.
Right? And make it, just so for everybody else that's out there, just to make sure, a third is their salary, a third is the overhead, and then a third is the profit. The biggest question I always get is, what constitute overhead? And that's everybody who's a non-producer in the firm. Okay. Yeah. And I always like to do that by bandwidth too, right? So if you've got an associate who can only bill at, $400 an hour, and you're billing at $700 an hour, whatever the numbers are, we want to make sure that the overhead is allocated by the maximum bandwidth that the person has, not on a per capita basis. So that's really the first place I would look.
And if you didn't understand that entirely while listening to the episode, this is why you should reach out to someone like Ed and have a good conversation about this, because this is a complex area. This is not something, there are a lot of things they don't teach you in law school, but they definitely are not teaching you then how to, I'm using this term to its extreme, how to get out of the law, right? That's not something that they're teaching.
They are not teaching that at all. That's correct.
Yeah.
So that's where I would begin. I would look at these. In that case, I would look at staffing. I would want to see the quality of the cases that were coming in and where are they coming from. So those are some things that I would start with.
Now let's take it and invert this idea a little bit. And let's imagine I have $3 million to burn, or you and I, Ed, we're going to become investors in some law firms together, and we've pooled together $5 million, whatever it might be, whatever number we want to use here. And we're going to start hunting for law firms to invest in, or maybe even buy entirely for ourselves. As investors, what do you think we should be looking for? Like, what are those going to be hidden heuristic clues or the setups that you really like that would make you go, man, I would buy this in a heartbeat because this is ready to be purchased and cranked up even higher?
Yeah, so this is what I call the hidden value drivers, right? Because ultimately, right, you want a good reputation in the community, and I'm looking to see if they have a really good database of their former clients so that we can reach out and monetize those clients. Now, if unfortunately, a lot of firms I find don't have an electronic database, which is shocking to me. But But
right?
it really is.
It's astonishing.
It really is. But one of the easiest things to do is let's go out, reactivate those former clients and start to get some revenue off of those, right? Because at the end of the day, we're buying in revenue at, let's just call it 2 times, right? So for each dollar of revenue, we're buying somewhere around $2. The purchase price is somewhere around $2, right? And so what I want to do is I want to increase that revenue as fast as I can, because then more dollars flow to the bottom line. So I then, instead of using the money that comes to pay the former owner or the loan I got to pay the former owner or pay back my investment one way or the other, now I'm adding to this and I'm paying back my investment faster. And so that I find is one of the quickest ways is to activate those former clients, to really dig down into the referral sources and, how can we maximize those referral sources? Are there others that are going out there? It's I find that after a while, lawyers will narrow down to the people that they know and that they've gone to lunch with for the last several years, and they haven't really expanded their referral network at all. So that would be a good way to do it too.
That actually makes me think about one issue that I've actually encountered up close with a law firm owner that I've worked with in the past, wherein he purchased a law firm. And one of the things that was he perceived as being to his advantage was the reputation of the owner and the owner's television commercials that had been run with the owner on it. And there was this plan of, hey, we're going to transition the celebrity status, all that type of stuff. In the buying, selling of a law firm, how much do you need to protect against that? How much is that really a viable asset? And how do you begin to calculate that as part of a purchase price?
So, yeah, a bunch of stuff there, right? So that is the major value, the goodwill of the firm, or in that case, of the owner, is the major value component that you're acquiring. And so making sure that that stays around is essential. Now, there's 2 ways to do that. One is we want to have an of counsel agreement. So we're bringing that attorney on board. And by the way, just as a quick aside, so the way that most of these deals are done is from an outside perspective, is I'm forming a new entity and I'm acquiring the assets of the old firm, right? So I want to... So I want to bring the lawyer of the old firm into my current firm and have them of counsel. And then we want to talk about what's the name of the firm, what are the rules locally. So in Florida, we can have trade names. So we could adopt a trade name as long as it's not deceptive, that includes the name of that owner, right? And so by virtue of doing that, I can transfer some of the goodwill that way. Part of what I acquire are the copyrights to the commercials. And then I would do a name, image, and likeness license for that owner. Now, you want the former owner to stay on board because, number one, they got to transition those clients and they got to transition those referral sources. Right. So it's that process that has to be part of this. Otherwise, you're winging it.
Yeah, which is one of the biggest concerns there. And even in that space of doing the transition, how much does that movement rely on some level of good faith versus a good contract?
Well, yeah. So, I mean, it's certainly good faith. I always tell people that there's no contract I can write that's going to save you from a criminal, right? Or somebody who doesn't want to live by it either way. So no matter what, there is going to be a good faith element. You got to get a good feel for the seller and, are they willing to do this? This is also the reason why getting an exit plan in place sooner rather than later is essential, because the more transition period you have, the more likely this thing is going to be successful. And, at the end of the day, that goodwill has to be put onto the buyer.
Okay. That seems to be one of those complicating factors. It doesn't mean that, of course, you don't do it. I mean, I think that we're probably, and I'm wondering if you agree with me, Ed, I feel like we are especially with private capital looking to fully enter the market, that we are at the beginning of like a tiny little wave that has started before the tsunami that could happen in the future. Is that your feeling on the market right now?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, there's a couple of complications that have to be dealt with before you could have private equity get into. Aside from the rule saying the private non-lawyers can't own
Mm-hmm.
law firms, right? There are other complicated issues in that. One of the goodwill is one of those complicated issues.
Yeah. Now, within all this, one of the things that we haven't kind of hit on yet is not selling the firm, but bringing a partner into the firm. And I think really in relation to a lot of the law firm owners that I work with, the bigger question is, how can I use equity as a tool to create investment within the practice, get someone who's a really high level player invested in the firm without just sort of saying, I don't know, here's 10%. Like, how can we structure earning those? And look, there's some, in some spaces of the business world, there are very well developed formulas on a lot of this, but it very much seems like law firms operate with a heavy fog of war. And that's why I'm so happy you're here, Ed, because it feels like you've already kind of opened up a vision on what can be seen in these possibilities. So if those are external, these are the internal possibilities of having someone earn equity. What are some of the different structures that you've seen there or that you've developed in there?
So, believe it or not, I call it sign and drive is one of the structures. You'll find that associates who have been with the firm and they typically don't have a pile of cash that they can put down on this, right? And so, if I'm
Right.
an owner and I just give them 10%, that's considered income for tax purposes. So now all of a sudden I've given them an potentially enormous tax bill in the year I gave them the 10%. So what we do is
Huh.
effectively drag that out over time, right? So we'll do,
Okay.
again, I call it sign and drive because it's like you went into the car dealership, you signed the note and you drove out with the car. And that's essentially what it is, right? So they come in, they purchase the stock or membership interest, whatever your firm is, for a note. So it's just literally 100% financed by the current owner. And then so they're now a 10% owner day one. So very important thing is got to make sure we have a good shareholders agreement, right? Because if things go south, we want this
Right.
to be undone easily. So that's kind of the first step.
Yeah.
The second step to it then is now we've got to make sure that the earnings, so the W-2 compensation for the lawyers reflects the fair market value of the services that they render. The reason for this is we want to true up profits. We want profits to accurately reflect the performance of the firm. And so I could, jack my W-2 comp up, way above what I would normally get. And as long as the firm supports it, if I'm 100% owner, who cares? It's not the best tax
Right.
thing to do, but who cares, right? Um,
Yeah.
but in doing this, we want to make sure that the profits are reflective of actual performance because those profits are then going to be used by the associate to pay off the note. And so the associate gets a distribution of profits. They have to pay tax on that because it's a distribution to them.
Mm-hmm.
So let's just call it 25% is their tax rate. 75% then goes to pay off the note. So as the firm performs better and better, the associate they're a true partner. They get the profits. They get some benefit out of making the firm perform better. And simultaneously, they're paying off that note. Now, as an owner, if I look at this, I say, well, there's an extra drag on the profit because the associate has to pay the tax and then I pay capital gains tax. And so, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there is that, but you got to look at the long-term effect of having retention of that associate who's now a partner and also
Right.
the exit plan that you're putting in place.
I mean, there are so many factors involved in this, and what I encounter with a lot of my coaching clients, Ed, is when we're talking about developing some of this plan, they're even toying with the idea of, okay, I've had this person who was an associate. They nominally call them a partner at this point. A partner in name only or non-equity partner, whatever term we want to use. and they're thinking more seriously about how do I get this person who is a mover and shaker within the firm invested in this. What are your thoughts on maybe how much to put on the table? Is there usually a good percentage? How to have that conversation? Some of those starting points to get a person heavily involved in a real partnership role.
The conversation is really the most important piece, that pre-partnership conversation, because partnership means so many different things to so many different people. For some, I've done deals. What's that?
It freaks some people out. That's why a lot of owners I know don't want to go down the path because of exactly what you're talking about.
Right. And so I think that it's important to understand what that person's goals are first. And that's the way I would approach it. I've worked with people who, where an associate has said, well, I want to be your partner. The next step when you have that is, well, what does that mean to you? I've worked with people where that meant I just want partner on my card so that when I go to drum up business, I'm seen as one of the principals of the firm. And I've had others who want to be involved in managing the firm. And so those are two totally different solutions to the problem.
So one of them is one is a title, and one is, I'm serious about the collective growth as opposed to individual growth.
That's right. And then the title piece, well, just an FYI. So, and in Florida in particular, you're not allowed to call somebody a partner unless they actually own equity in your firm. And that is, that's part of the rule, it being misleading according to the bar ethical rules. So what we would do in that situation, if they just wanted to be named a partner, is we give them one share stock, and then they would be a partner, and we could buy them out at any point in time, and they can legitimately hold themselves out as a partner. So that accomplishes that. If they want to be a true owner, then I have taken the position that it's really a kind of 10% is the right number to bring them in at, for a couple of reasons. 10% seems meaningful to people. Don't know why, but it does. And 10%, so I don't know. It's just kind of weird the way people look at things sometimes. So
agreed.
And the other thing is SBA rules would allow a 10% owner to use their equity as long as they own it, so that note is paid off, to as enough equity to go get an SBA loan to buy out the rest of the equity of the partner. And so this really sets up a great second step for the exit, of the original owner.
That transitions, so that's really helpful because that kind of naturally transitions into the third phase of this, which is, we'll call it, you'll probably have a better term for it. The way that I think of it is emergency exit planning, which is something catastrophic happens to the owner. Perhaps they pass away, and a lot of owners think about, okay, I'm going to pass away. I've built this asset that now does, let's say, $2 million per year in revenue. It's the asset that I'm using to feed my family. And what happens if I kick the bucket? How do you help owners plan for that?
So that is very circumstance driven. So if the owner is one that says, hey, I need to take care of my family primarily, the best possible vehicle for that is an insurance policy. Nothing better, right? So So you got to insure for your income, and then you got to insure for your assets. And one of those assets is your law firm. The other side of it is if they say, hey, I really want to take care of my team too. Okay, now what we can do is an external buy sell. So if they have no associate, or they have an associate, but they don't feel that person is capable of taking over, we could do an external buy sell. So we just set it up with another person in the community to come over and take over the firm. And hopefully we can set it up with insurance. So it's a mutual buy sell. But if it doesn't work, then there are other alternatives to it. And then the third way is obviously, that internal transfer. Bring somebody in as an associate, as a partner, and then begin a training program to bring them in, because being an associate is so different than being an owner. you got to train them.
Dramatically, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I can't imagine, one day you're an associate, you wake up the next day, you get the phone call, such and such has passed away. Congratulations, you now own the law firm, and they go, oh, by the way, later today you're going to meet with the bookkeeper. There are some HR questions to answer. The phones are on the fritz, so make sure you get the right person to call the IT company. And just so you know, there's a load of tax planning that you're now going to need to handle. And the attorney going, what about the clients? And them going, yeah, you'll find time for that too.
There you go. The shock of shocks.
Yeah. Truly, truly. Okay, Ed. So if people are interested in learning more about this type of planning, perhaps working with you or learning from resources that you have, where should we send them?
So the best place is exitmylawpractice.com. And there you'll be able to download the book, Guide to Selling Your Florida Law Practice. And even though it has Florida in the title, you can use it for other states. You just have to look up your own ethical rules for it. But that is the resource that really talks about the 4 ways you can exit your firm and how to set up for the 2 that actually get some value into either your retirement account or to your family, one of the 2.
That's awesome. Okay, Ed, one last question for you. It's a 3-parter. What are you reading, watching, and listening to these days?
So reading is a book called The Good Life, which is about the results of that Harvard study that they started on men in the 30s, and then they followed them through their careers, and then they followed their families, and the results of that and how they came out with this idea of how to live the good life, which really is a fascinating book. And just, spoiler alert, it's about relationships. So it's amazing. Yeah.
There we go.
The second one is 10X is easier than 2X. I love this book. I thought it was originally a little goofy. But then as I got into it, I realized, hey, this is like 80-20 on steroids. And I really like that a lot. So it's a good book. Podcasts. So would be My First Million, which I think is I love that podcast. And then The Soul of Enterprise, which is Ron Baker and another gentleman. Ron is the guy who wrote about the fixed price revolution in probably the late 90s. He's a CPA. And I really enjoy that podcast. That's good.
Wow.
So then watching is Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I love my Star Trek. I'm like a Trek crazy person. And then also bicycling videos. What would you expect? Bicycling, touring, bicycling, fixing up old 80s and 90s bikes. I love those. My wife can't understand it, but I love them.
Yeah, I'll tell you as a fun little bit of trivia here related to that. My kids and I have really been into watching like 8-minute long videos of mountain bike trails and people just doing their live footage of the trail ride going down. Sometimes a little bit narration. And our favorite thing is how often, and the girls will, whenever the narrator says it, they'll say the word gnarly. And so the girls will shout out gnarly right after that happens. But we're enjoying, once they're old enough, we'll maybe hit some real trails.
I have a friend who says the time to do that. I have a friend who says the time to do that kind of mountain biking is when you're under your parents' insurance.
Well, I will always be exactly dumb enough to do something like that. And I so appreciate having you on the show. I really appreciate it, truly, that fog of war comment earlier. There's a reason I wanted to have you on here, and it really is because there is so much fog of war in this area. And even some of the rudimentary thought processes about this will be, in some cases, showing fire to a caveman for many law firm owners and get them thinking about the possibilities of exit planning, what it means for them. And of course, in setting up an exit, you have to start thinking about how you would get there, which to get there, you have to build a great law firm. So it's a great exercise, in addition to its practical benefits, to undertake in your practice. So Ed, thank you so much for your insight, wisdom, knowledge, and tips throughout this episode. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlie. I appreciate it as well.
All right, and we will see you all in the next episode of They Don't Teach This in Law School.